Do you know who Ed Johnson is?
No, I don't.
Do you know who Ed Johnson is?
No, we don't.
Do you know who Ed Johnson is?
I don't.
Nope.
Cool. Do you know who Ed Johnson is?
No. Who is Ed Johnson?
On March 19, 1906, Ed Johnson, an African-American man, was pulled from his jail cell by a white mob and lynched on the Chattanooga Walking Bridge. The subsequent Supreme Court case drew national attention as it represented widespread feelings of unrest. Though his lynching was not the first, his death and final words, "God bless you all, I am an innocent man," changed the course of race relations and justice in America forever.
Of course, you know I've been leading the educational crusade of the story of Ed Johnson, the young man that was lynched on the Walnut Street Bridge. And for many years, what I found was that people who were not aware of the story were sometimes not understanding of the people who were aware of the story and had feelings about it. So, for instance, there were African Americans who chose not to walk upon the bridge, right? And then there may have been white people who just didn't understand, well, what do you got against the bridge? And what does this have to do with you? And you know, this was so long ago, why does it matter?
But I think our history matters because it shapes who we are. You know, there's the trite phrase kind of history repeats itself, but I think that doesn't really tell the whole story. History shapes who we are. And until we know kind of what our past was, whatever that may be, you know, it includes lynchings. I mean, there's people in town here who know that their grandparents were part of that lynching crowd. I mean, that shapes who they are. You know, the African American community knows that, you know, they were in danger of being lynched, and that shapes who they are. So I think it's really important just recognizing that and kind of saying, okay, this is who we are, but what can we learn from this?
And so I believe that when you talk about stories like that, and where people can fill in the gaps and talk about how this has impacted them or how this has impacted someone they love, and you bring about that understanding, or you bring about that information, and you know, for some it's just, oh, I didn't know, or for some it's, wow, I didn't know. I've been, you know, I figured if Leroy Phillips could dedicate 30 years of his life, and I'm just at 17 years, I've got some more time, and that I can continue to help tell the story and to help other people know about the story of Ed Johnson. So that it's not just, oh, there was an African American or a black man lynched from the Walnut Street Bridge. No, Ed Johnson was lynched from this bridge, or Alfred Blunt was lynched from this bridge.
You know, it's honor. It is, and not only for Ed Johnson himself, who had to go through this terrible tragedy, but the lawyers and the people who fought for justice and springboarded human rights and civil rights benchmarks in this country.
Though Ed Johnson's lynching took place 111 years ago, the aftermath of his death affects us all. Race relations in Chattanooga have changed with the decades, but underlying tension has persisted as we have grown and changed as a city.
I think it's gotten more sophisticated, but racism is still alive and well in Chattanooga.
More details are emerging about the Nazi rally being planned for Chattanooga. The county commission has given the National Socialist Movement approval to rally on the lawn of the Hamilton County Courthouse April 26th. The group is traveling here to celebrate its 40th anniversary. Their leader, Jeff Scoop, says the party chose Tennessee because of the large number of supporters they have in the state. But
I just think that with regards to racism in today's society, like, I don't go out of my house feeling like somebody's going to lynch me. You know what I mean? So in that way, racism has definitely changed, right? Like, I think it's and you sort of hear this, is that racism has sort of become more institutionalized. So, you know, we see there are a lot of young black males that come from, you know, tough backgrounds that, you know, struggle with law enforcement and have different sort of issues, right? And so those are examples of that's an example of like how racism is sort of institutionalized and sort of how it sort of weaved its way into our society.
Governor Bill Haslam wants the Confederate flag removed from Tennessee license plates. More than 2,000 specialty tags support the Sons of Confederate Veterans. 3 years ago, Haslam signed a bill allowing the plates on motorcycles too. Haslam also says he favors removing the statue of a KKK founder from the Tennessee Capitol. House Majority Leader Gerald McCormick says he wants the bust replaced with Davy Crockett.
Well, often black people are told to, get up by your bootstraps, forget about the past, but we are the only group of people that are told to forget the past about what happened to them. If you said that to a Jewish person about the Holocaust, he might punch you in the face.
As an African American male, you definitely experience differences, and even as an educated African American male. For instance, when I go to the mall, people don't know that I have 3 degrees, or that I'm a principal, or that I'm an educator. They see me as an African American male, and so sometimes you want to follow me through the mall to make sure that I'm not taking something.
This has, I don't know if you're aware of it, but this has come up numerous times in the last 15 years, and the memorial, particularly the memorial project, and it never moved forward, somewhat because of a lot of pushback from the community. I think some of the concern is how the memorial is portrayed and what it is. Some people, I think, when they hear the word lynching memorial, they think of maybe a man in a noose hanging from the bridge, which is of course not remotely what we hope to do. We hope to make it truthful and full of truth-telling, but to still tell the whole story in a way that is positive and brings a community together, not tears it apart.
So you have people that drive around with Confederate flags all the time, and with people that do Civil War reenactments on the Chickamauga battlefield. Now, the last time I checked, the South lost, right? But still, there are people who feel a need to do those because it's a part of history. And I'm not going to knock it because it's a part of history, and so it's okay for us to remember that portion of history. So in that same light, I think it's totally appropriate, especially when you're talking about the murder of a man, is to say, hey, look, there's some history here that it wasn't good, but it's a part of our history, and we need to embrace it, all right, so that we can learn not to ever repeat the same mistake again.
This piece of history, not just the tragedy at Johnson, but the legal action thereafter, it was important for me to educate not only myself, but the youth that I work with directly, because at any time, they feel like they could be on either side of that spectrum. So I thought it was really important to educate myself and the community around me about the Ed Johnson story.
So, we have to kind of look at other things other than just the Ed Johnsons and the Bessie Smith. We need to look at, as much as we possibly can, like the Roy Knowles, which is my father. He brought the museum so that we will know about our history, and he says in there, if we don't know our history, then we're doomed to repeat it. So know your history. That's a good thing.
Well, the one thing about the truth is that it may not always be pleasant, but it's undeniable. And when something is spoken from truth, it is what it is. And you have to find your own way to recognize and appreciate that. But to hear the truth and then just refuse to acknowledge it is it's pretty deep.
I love my city, but my city can do better.